Hit record. Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening, wherever you are and whenever you're listening. You are listening to the Happy Recap Radio Show. That's right, the Happy Recap Radio Show for the week of July 5th, 2020. After a long, dark podcast depth that you've reached, we're back. Sorry about that. JB and EJ are here with you, joining the modern era a bit. Unfortunately, you can see me. Fortunately, you can see my co-host. And we're here to talk all things Mets baseball and certainly try to be a little bit of escape in the lack of normalcy that we've had over the past few months. EJ, I tell you, one of the things that has kind of held me together, it has been baseball, even though I was watching Korean baseball in the middle of the night. Still am occasionally. But I was watching their scrimmages, EJ. That's how desperate for baseball I was, because that was my one little grasp of what I would normally be experiencing in, April and May.
Yeah, I've become something of an expert of the KBO myself, to the point where I find that I have teams that I'm rooting for, which for no rhyme or reason whatsoever. But I guess – it's been incredible to me that it's been 3 years since you and I have done this, and that constantly that we've been getting tweets on both of our feeds from fans who I didn't even know that we had, saying, hey, when are you guys firing up the podcast again? You guys got to come back and do the podcast again. And I was always like, yeah, we're going to do the podcast again. We're just on a little bit of a hiatus right now. And in my back of my mind, that hiatus was a matter of a couple of months, maybe even a year. I had no idea that it had been 3 years since we did this. And I guess the question that was answered is, what's it going to take for you guys to come back? Well, you now have your answer. It's just going to take a global pandemic that reduces baseball to a 60-game potential schedule. There you go. We're back.
The question has to be asked, if we take another hiatus. I don't want to know what would bring us back then. But yeah, no, it's one of those things. I think we laid down the microphones thinking, give us a month or two, recharge our jets, and the jets took a little longer to recharge. And again, we're at an age now where that it does definitely take slower. But the reality was, I had gotten the same question to you. So when are you going to do that? I'm like, we'll get around to it. We're both into it. We're both down with it. We're both excited about doing it. Ryan, of course, who joined us on many a podcast back in the day. I know he was interested in joining us. He'll probably be with us along the way. Certainly hope he will. But the questions are there. And again, same thing. Surprised. Like, it almost is like for those little conversations you and I would have every week, and with some great guests, and certainly hope to have some of them back as well. People were listening. It wasn't just you and me talking, and that's kind of been really humbling and exciting to know that there was some demand to do this again.
It's funny, when we first started this thing, it kind of was just the three of us talking.
It was.
We were fine with it. We were just doing this as a hobby for ourselves. We love talking to each other about baseball, particularly the Mets. And over time, next thing you know, we started seeing these numbers growing, and we couldn't believe it at first, of the downloads we were getting on a weekly basis. And I really want to say a sincere, heartfelt thanks to everybody who has reached out over the past 3 years and said, when are you going to do this again? Because this was just a side project of something we love doing. And the fact that people were dedicated to us, and the fact that people 3 years later were still asking us. And I was genuinely emotionally touched the other night when I made the announcement on the Twitter page that we were coming back to do this weekend, and the outpouring of encouragement and just love we got from a lot of our diehards. It meant the world to me. It just the fact that something we're doing just out of for fun basically was even if it just helps people get 30 minutes not thinking about the state of affairs in the world and just having some fun shooting the BS with us for a little while. It meant the world to me, that the reaction that I got on both the Facebook and the Twitter page when I announced that we were going to do this. And it's not going to be a one and done. We're back, baby. We're fired up. We are completely got our gears going, and the past week planning this out with you and kind of discussing the logistics of it all have my juices flowing again. So I'm so thrilled to be doing this with you again. I'm so thrilled to be doing this for you guys again. And keep it interactive. We're doing the video part now. We're doing audio. We're going to have it released in multiple different ways. And we want to be as interactive as possible with you guys out there. So just keep firing up, keep listening, and we're going to be here for you however long this season potentially is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, it's one of those things too. If you're just joining us for the first time going, who are these idiots and why should I listen to them? It's worth pointing out our former home, Blog Talk Radio, still has our archives for, believe it or not, 8.5 years worth of broadcasts that we did with some great interviews. I mean, we had Met players, we had Met prospects, and I'd like to point out almost every draft pick in fact, every draft pick we had on, and we had on a number of them, including Dom Smith and Clement Plawecki, Stephen Matz. All of them made the major leagues. So draft picks, if you're listening right now, come on the show. It's kind of the pass. It's the golden ticket. This show will get you to the bigs, apparently. But we had some great shows on there. Ed Hearn from the '86 Mets. I mean, we had some great journalists, people that we don't have any right to be talking to. I'll be honest. They came on this show and talked. So by all means, check out that blogtalkradio.com/the happy recap. You'll find 8 years worth of archives of the happy recap. Check us out, learn a little bit about us. But for now, the website you can check us out is thehappyrecap.libsyn, LIBSYN.com. And that's where you'll be able to find all the podcasts, download them. Of course, whatever service you use in this day and age, it's one of 80, I'm sure. To list them all would take the whole show nowadays, EJ. Podcasting seems like it was so much smaller then.
It really was. As I said on the Twitter the other night, in an age where anybody with a vocal cord has a podcast. When we first started doing this all those years ago, it felt like it was us and maybe one or two others, and now it just feels like the podcast world is aplenty. But I really think that we'll still have our niche. And if you are going to go back and listen to the older episodes, maybe start like season 2, because as Mrs. Recap, as I affectionately call my wife, said to me when I told her that we were doing this again, her first reaction was, "Is this when you're going to start day drinking on Sundays again?" And those early years were certainly certainly the wild, wild west for us. But I'm down to I'm a matured man. I like to think I'm all about the sweet tea now, and that's the hardness I'll be consuming while we do this go around.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that the other part is, of course, we always had a firm time every Sunday. It was 6 o'clock your time, 3 o'clock mine, and then eventually moved an hour earlier. But the funny thing is, when I look at this podcast, it was an outgrowth of chats on our website.
Yep.
Thehappyrecap.com, may it rest in peace. Which started with all of us having participated in a forum on originally MLB.com and then another website, and then on to, starting our own. I mean, you and I are nearly at the 2-decade mark of knowing each other. And we've certainly been working on sites now for the better part of 16 years. Because I think we launched Happy Recap in 2004 or thereabouts. And, it's funny, what was just supposed to be hey, if we did a podcast, it might be a little easier to do these interviews than doing them in a web chat. So it was kind of a supplement for the people on our website. The half dozen or so regulars that we had, great folks all, most of which I'm still in contact with, and I know you are as well. This was not supposed to be the thing, and this has now become, by default, the mothership.
It's amazing when you think to give you a sense of how long it's been. The event that sparked the offshoot of the MLB.com message boards to the site that eventually the Happy Recap would grow out of, that was Vladimir Guerrero not being signed by the Mets because of his bad back.
Yes.
That is how far back this thing goes, to the Mets claiming that Vlad's back was going to explode at some point, and that's why they didn't sign him. So that's how long we've been kind of riding this thing together. And you're right,
Woo!
This is the tent pole now, this podcast, and I'm just to go from Vlad's bad back till will Yoenis Cespedes be a full participant it's a long road to travel.
Yeah, it certainly is, and I do want to get to the fact that, of course, this weekend started some are affectionate referring to as summer camp, spring training 2.0. Hopefully it's not, spring training 2. Hopefully it's not as bad as Ghostbusters 2, that kind of thing. Certainly better not be worse than Caddyshack 2. But
doesn't exist.
I agree.
Rocky 5, Caddyshack 2, they never happened.
It's kind of like me with the Star Wars prequels.
Right.
One, two, three.
Exactly.
They do not exist.
Also do not exist.
Those are not the films you're looking for. But the thing I want to touch on real quickly first, I'm gonna blindside you a little bit off the page is obviously the Vlad Guerreros are a segue here is that of course was a signing that didn't occur to what was then referred to as the extremely cheap Wilpons. And the coupon, I think that was pretty much the birth of the Freddie coupon
Yep.
nickname that pervades itself and still makes its way through the Twitterverse each time. I think the creator of whom thinks they created it themselves. But hey, I just thought of something. We should call him Freddie Coupon. It's been happening for years, dude.
Decades.
Even when they were spending lots of money, they were still called Freddie Coupon.
Right.
But we're at a point now where we know at least 4 potential interested parties in purchasing the team, with rumors that there are up to 7 that have been allowed to look at the books. We know Steve Cohen has already looked at the books. While that deal fell through, there's not a lot of people who believe he's out of the picture whatsoever. What are your thoughts, feelings right now? As supposedly bids are due this week, that we may see an actual changing of the guard in Flushing?
So I've always said when it comes to the Wilpon selling, I'm not going to be Charlie Brown trying to kick the football from Lucy.
Same.
I'm not going to believe it until the ink is dry. However, I do think we are at a point where it is going to happen. And I'm conflicted because my head and my heart want 2 different things. My head wants Cohen. He's a good owner. He owns one of my other teams. He knows sports. He knows how to treat fans. I really like the idea of him being the owner of the Mets, and he wants the Mets. That's the thing I really like about him is he really wants the Mets. My heart, though, you know me. I have always been and always will be. I'm an ARod guy. I love ARod, even when the entire nation hated ARod. When he was on the Rangers making $252 million, the first year that he was on the Rangers, my birthday present for my wife that year was an autographed ARod ball. I love ARod. Even when he went to the hated Yankees, I still couldn't bring myself to hate ARod. I love ARod, and ARod adores the Mets. He wanted to be a Met so bad in his playing career. He loves the team. I know he would be nothing more than a small minority owner of a much larger financed group. But if ARod was a part owner of the Mets, I just think it would be fun. And I think that's desperately what Major League Baseball needs right now. They need to inject some fun into the game. And I think ARod would be a lot of fun. But like I said, my head wants Cohen. My heart wants ARod.
Yeah, I look at it. Cohen, first of all, guy's wall-to-wall money.
Yeah.
When you have a, multi-millionaire that can basically, drop change on the floor and be enough to buy the Mets, and not really notice the purchase. I think that, you've got a guy who's uniquely skilled and talented to be able to own a major league franchise. I'm always worried about the 2 things I worry about with ARod and J-Lo are 1, 3 actually. 1, I'm going to be honest, Jeter. And how that has gone in Miami. And I'm not saying that they're similar types or all, but it's, they're very well associated, so it's hard not to. And again, I'm not saying these are fair. I'm just saying that this is what 2, the McCourts.
Sure.
J-Lo and her reputation for moving on is well known in the tabloids.
Sure.
And certainly they would be constant tabloid fodder and a potential distraction level in the New York press. You'd literally have Met beat writers and Met owner beat writers because, let's face it, is Page Six going to go a week without a J-Lo story or an ARod story? No, of course not. They're going to want them. So Puma's going to have to deal with having somebody next to him who's there only to cover the owners. But you have that. And, of course, obviously, they break up. We've got problems. More than anything, though, I look at what I call Major League 2 syndrome. And that, of course, is, Major League 2, which is not as bad as Caddyshack 2. But you have Corbin Burnson buying the Indians from Rachel Phelps. And the reality was he'd spent too much on the franchise and could barely afford to operate it. And I'm afraid of that, of somebody who's had to cobble together their money from every possible investor and goes in basically all in to buy the team. What are they going to have to do to keep the team running. And unfortunately, in a lot of those situations, and MLB lets it happen all the time, the answer is cut payroll.
Sure.
And, the reality is, do we want that? No, we want increased payroll. We want, or at least maintained payroll. Going backwards is not an option right now. And that is my biggest concern of any of them. I mean, notwithstanding anybody who has to cobble the money together. It could be Jerry Seinfeld. It could be any of the minority owners other than Steve Cohen. It could be, Bill Maher. Same thing. All those. So it's not just, I'm not focusing solely on those two. It's their situation. They're heavily financed. They're heavily using outside money, which means, they're going to have to either get enough to operate the team, but we're learning right now, this is a team that apparently has been losing $50 million a year. Well, easy solution, cut $50 million in payroll. We don't want that. We don't need that. That's not a good competitive decision. So you need somebody who can absorb that. And I think, it really comes down to, that's Steve Cohen.
Right. And three very fair criticisms of you for you that ARod joining us. I wouldn't so much be concerned about the Jeter in Florida.
No, that's the least of my concerns.
Yeah, and I know this is going to be taken as Yankee bashing, and it really isn't. I feel that ARod is far more passionate about the game of baseball than Derek Jeter ever was. It might just be from his broadcasting experience the past couple of years, but I really came to respect ARod so much more based on his knowledge and his very enthusiastic passion for the game. The McCourt situation, totally fair. I mean, if ever you would think there would be the potential for a volatile breakup, I mean, come on, these are two of the biggest stars in the world. So obviously that potential is there. As far as the money goes, I would hope that there would be an investment team all put together that we wouldn't have to worry about hemorrhaging money the way that we have been hemorrhaging it in recent years. I would hope that it wouldn't just be basically on ARod, hey, you got to pony up the 50 million. I would hope there would be enough investors that they could kind of block against any type of potential massive payroll salary getting cut. I'd have to see the structure of the investment team before I really have that comfort level. But that's one that I hope we'd be able to offset by basically just throwing really good money at a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I agree with you though. I do think, as far as the Lucy and the football analogy that you made earlier with the Wilpons, I do think that the ball is firmly down. I do think that we are in the end days of Wilpon ownership. And, I know I have said this on the original incarnation of the show. The only thing that worries me is sometimes the better the devil you know than the one you don't. Because, it could, I know this is hard to believe, folks. It could be worse. And, I'd like to believe that it couldn't be worse, but it could. I don't think with Cohen, I don't think with several others. I think the real risk we run here, again, of how it can be worse is somebody who needs to cut payroll to survive.
Right. And let's face it, I mean, the Wilpons in their current financial state, they're probably
heading the same direction.
Right, exactly. They're going to have to do the same thing if they have to start paying back these loans. So I think they are in that situation, and I would hope that the ownership that we bring in, again, if it's Cohen, great. I mean, he can throw money at it all day long, and he's proven with his other franchises he's willing to. So hopefully, that if that is the direction that they go, that's payroll will never be an issue the way it has been in recent years with us. Well, I don't think we'll ever be talking about a sub $100 million payroll on the Mets if Steve Cohen is in charge.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think you're going to be talking about a top 5 in MLB payroll pretty much every year, provided that, that it needs to be. I mean, I certainly have said a number of times over the years that, you don't always have the top payroll. I mean, 5-6 years ago when we were rocking that rotation, with Harvey, Syndergaard, DeGrom, etc. Those were all people on their rookie contracts at that point, and you didn't really have to worry about paying $20 million per starter because you just didn't need to, because quite frankly, you're not going to find a Jacob DeGrom out there for $20 million. Now we have a Jacob DeGrom for $20 million, so it's okay. But, at the same time, within reason. So if you've got a good amount of prospects, and young players, then yeah, you don't need that top 5 payroll. But this is New York, or at least for you, the New York metro area, and for me as well. I'm way on the other side of the country, but it's certainly, this is the New York market. You need to compete. You need to show up, and it's time for them to finally show up. And I'm still a very much a spend, but spend wisely.
Right.
I don't want to see any more Glavin type contracts out there, Bay type contracts, just to spend. But I think that we need an owner that will come in and go, you know what, I am going to keep a competitive team on the field, and if that means I go over budget, that means I go over budget.
Yeah, and let's face it, a lot of those blue chip good young prospects, they're here. They've arrived. So those are guys who are going to have to get paid pretty soon in a lot of cases. And you may not have the quality of your DeGroms coming up through the farm system for a while now. So it's going to come to a point where you're going to have to be relying far more on free agents in the trade market than you can on the minor league talent getting here. From what I've seen of the assessment of the Mets talent, is it's there, but it's the real top tier talent is still fairly low in the system. Plus, you're scrapping minor leagues for this entire season too. So that's just another year of development you're going to lose on some of these guys. So to remain competitive in the next immediate coming years, you're going to have to do so via payroll and free agents.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to be very interested over time to see what the impact of, the fact that we're losing essentially the minor league season. I mean, I know that there had been some talk about postseason when they do the Arizona Fall League, adding a Florida Fall League as well, and trying to expand what they do down there. But that was a month or two ago, before things got maybe a little bit more out of hand than they were with the old COVID there in both Arizona and Florida. So I wonder if those plans will be kiboshed and we'll lose that possibility of development as well. One of these weeks we'll definitely bring in some we know some good minor league experts. We'll bring them in and talk about that, because I think that that's one of those things that it's going to be very interesting, because what happens here, I mean, we talk about the impact right now, and as you see certain players opting out, even certain coaches. I mean, the Mets will have a coach operating remotely for much of, if not all of the season. But this is going to be an game changer through baseball for the next 5-6 years, because of what it's done to the development cycle and economic cycle. I mean, there are teams in the minor leagues. I mean, I know that there's been talk about cutting teams, but they may not have to. Half the teams in minor league baseball may go bust if they don't get some help. So, I mean, it's a very interesting situation and a time for baseball. And, I'll be honest, hell of a time to be buying a team, but or selling one. But, certainly they seem to be getting the bids. They seem to be getting the offers. But let's transition a little bit over to the playing side of things. As we've seen the first couple of days of summer camp, and I'll be honest, I'm kind of hoping at some point major league teams start doing what the KBO did in the early days of their spring, when they started playing the intra-squad games. They broadcast them on YouTube live. Because they're outside the contract, their typical TV contracts. I'm really and eventually they even added announcers. Darned if I knew what they were saying, but they were announcing the game. And still more interesting than ESPN. Go figure. But the reality of it is we're operating at a very odd time, and you have players choosing not to play. 4 players on the Braves yesterday were announced to have tested positive, including Freddie Freeman, who sounds like he got it pretty bad. Despite the fact that he's a Met killer, obviously have absolute respect for him as a player and hope for a fast, speedy, and complete recovery. It's one of those strange things where, we're going to be seeing a lot of people hit the disabled list over time for nothing on paper. No reason given. And we're in this is, I've never, I jokingly have said for the last year or so that HIPAA is why we don't know what's going on with Jed Lowry. And that very well may be the case, but HIPAA really applies to this year's baseball. And I got to ask, I mean, you and I are obviously both past our playing days. major league wise at least. Of course, I'm a lefty, so I probably could go. Jesse Orosco was still pitching at my age,
Yeah.
but the question is, how would you approach this? I mean, I understand both sides of it, but as a player, could you go?
It's a tough question. I did post on Twitter when Ryan Zimmerman announced that he wasn't going to be going. I respect the hell out of the guy. I hate the uniform. I respect the hell out of the man. That's a decision he felt he had to make for his family. And who am I to question? I'm a father. You're a father. We're both husbands. You have to consider what's in the best interest of your family. I know my mother has a severe respiratory ailment that if she was to catch this thing, it would most likely be fatal for her. I think in the best interest of my family, my oldest son is asthmatic. I think in the best interest of my family, I would have to, at the very least, say, hey guys, go ahead and get through this summer camp thing, because while we have 10,000 cases a day exploding in Florida and we're hitting all-time highs nationwide, I know things are okay here in New York, New Jersey area, but I just don't know that I'd be willing to take that risk with my family. If it was me as a single guy in my mid-20s, totally different story. I think I would absolutely take that chance. I think I would run that risk because I do love baseball that much. But as a family guy, I just don't think I can take that risk.
Yeah, I think it would be one of those things that if I was able to make a go of it, I mean, I have my family is all generally healthy, and there's at least a slight possibility that it's already traveled through this house way before people were even testing for it. But the reality of it is that I've not been able to see my own dad for 4 months, going on 5 here shortly, because right before quarantine I was sick from what potentially could have been COVID, but for several weeks. And he's in a facility, and on hospice. But so I mean, no question, he gets it. It will be fatal. But at the same time, rather unfortunately, he doesn't have much time left to begin with. But I think those things combined would probably be like, what, this is an opportunity to be home, and I'm going to take it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you will not hear me besmirch the name of any player who makes that decision. This is an unprecedented time. It's nothing we've ever experienced before. This isn't a guy who's maybe letting a nagging hammy keep him out for a couple games too many. This is something that is potentially life altering for these guys. So any guy who makes the decision not to play, I'm going to have to respect that. And the guys who do run it out there and decide to play, respect the hell out of them too, because they're letting their love of the game put them in a pretty risky situation, and they're still going forward with it. So kudos to both groups of players, and it's not for me to judge either way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the thing too, obviously, as a fan, even though I would probably opt out myself, again, this being where I am in life and
Right.
where I am today, again, 15 years ago before I was married, different story. But also, a lot more flexible then too. So I was probably, more durable and more useful to a team because they all need water boys. But the best way I saw it put is Justin Toscano of the Record, NJ.com. The wrote an article for North Jersey that be happy that baseball back, but be understanding if it doesn't stay. And I think that's a great way to look at it from a fan standpoint. I'm so, I mean, it's funny. I was driving around yesterday from pickup to pickup, because that's just what we do these days, curbside pickup to curbside pickup. And I was listening to the 80s channel on satellite radio, and Center Field came on by John Fogerty. And for the first time in 3 months, hearing that song didn't make me sad. It
Right.
made me
Right.
excited. I was getting pumped up by that, that stale old classic. But I'm just watching video this morning of some of the, just Cespedes taking some hacks in the cage, or DeGrom pitching and in a sim game for an inning. I mean, these are the type of things. It's like, oh, this is good. This feels good. But we do have to understand things can go down. And I know that I think it was Sean Doolittle was complaining to the press earlier today, and we're recording the show on Sunday the 5th, that the Nationals don't even have their PPE yet.
It's unbelievable. That's absolutely just, how is that even a possibility? But it is. I read that article as well. That's insane. And it's funny, like you said, the little things that really just stand out. I saw the tweet of the Cespedes hitting a homer in BP, and I actually forwarded it to one of my friends in the text, and I just said, that sound though, and the sound of the ball hitting the bat and the echo of the empty stadium and hearing the crack of the bat. I mean, that was a pure, just inject this into my veins moment. It is as healing as anything that I've had in the past 4 months, was just that sound of Cespedes cracking a ball.
Yeah, I mean it's just and seeing I think it was a press conference yesterday with Conforto, who's looking good, and I'm
Yep.
sure it's only a matter of time before. I mean, I know we've seen Pete on the field, but I don't think he has spoken to the press quite yet. But seeing everybody out there, including the people that were, of course, a certain Met beat reporter who won't be named Puma, throughout, tried to throw out some fear when Rosario and Stroman weren't out there on Friday, and both are out today, and they're healthy. They're I believe the criteria, if I'm not mistaken, EJ, if we see them on the field, they have tested negative, correct?
Yes. So Louis was saying in the press conference that they had to be tested. They're getting their temperature checks and their wellness checks every day before they can come in. They're entering the stadium staggered. They have shifts that they're allowed to come in on. So, I mean, they're doing everything in their power, right, to make sure that they have a handle on this thing. I'm kind of amazed that of the team based in New York, and granted, guys scatter once the season was over, but for a team based in New York, they've only had one positive, and it was months ago on the entire ball team. Whereas opposed to the Yanks just had two before they came back to New York. It's kind of amazing that when you think of the rate of infection that this thing has, that you can actually have 50 guys and only one test positive. And Louis was saying at his press conference too that as of right now, they don't have a single guy who cannot go for a baseball-related injury. And that's really, I mean, granted, you've got Noah getting the Tommy John surgery, but when you're talking about this many guys who are seemingly healthy amongst a friggin' global pandemic, that's kind of amazing.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I think that it sounds like, even talking when Brody was talking on, it must have been
All the days
Thursday.
are the same right now, my
Yeah, they
friend. All
really
the days
are.
are the same.
It's one of them that ended with Y. I can
Right.
narrow it down that far. Brody did a Zoom press conference on one of the days. It may have been Wednesday or Thursday, but one of the things when he was talking about it, that how fortunate the Mets had been with how few people in the organization had gotten this thing. Especially when you look at the intake numbers, which have been hovering around 2% ish around Major League Baseball, give or take a little bit, because of some of the teams have not gotten all their testing back yet. But the reality is, some of the other leagues, I mean, NBA and NHL, are between 5 and 10%, and it's like, whoa. How has baseball been so different? And it's not a matter of, once you're off the field, you're living the same lives.
Right. Right. I almost wonder if the guys who do live locally, who live in Connecticut and Jersey and the Long Island, I'm almost wondering if being in the epicenter like we were for about 6 weeks a couple of months ago didn't actually serve them well, because we went hardcore lockdown in this area. Nobody was leaving the house. No, like they said, you could go to the grocery store. The one time I went to the grocery store, it was like something out of the stand. It was empty. So everybody was hunkered down, and I don't know if that ended up serving the Mets players who do live locally well, that we were part of that epicenter. Because I know I sure as hell wasn't leaving the house.
No, and there were weeks I didn't leave the house.
Same.
You're
Yep.
out here, and mind you, what we've had in Oregon is a fraction. I mean, our if you look at our statewide totals in cases and deaths, it's not even one of the worst days New York City faced.
Yeah, yeah, it was rough there, but I'm wondering. I think these guys probably they're humans just like us.
Yeah,
They
they
see
are.
something horrible happening out there. They're like, I ain't going out there. So I think a lot of them all just hunkered down and got to know their spouses really well.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's I'm I think it's safe to say we're looking at a late year baby boom
Yeah,
around,
for sure.
for those still in that age range. But the reality of it is that yeah, it's a very different scenario. But and we're not actually to the place. I know that somebody said in the Twitter that one of the things they were looking forward to most was me saying actual baseball is actually happening. I'm hoping we get there. I'm hopeful we're going to get there, and certainly having 60 players in camp between the City Field and the Brooklyn, that maybe we've got enough guys to make it through. But it's one of those things. Once this thing starts getting through, if it gets in, it's not coming out.
Yeah, I do have a feeling that we're going to see real baseball. I don't know, like that article earlier, I don't know if we're going to see a conclusion to the season, but I think they're going to do everything in their power to make sure that this thing does get started back up. Um, my heart of hearts says that I think we do get shut down at some point, unfortunately, just based on the infection rate of this thing. But it seems to me I will give Major League Baseball a lot of credit, where I was killing them for the stupid negotiations that they were going back and forth about, and
Yeah.
some of the minor details that they were fighting over. Just want you to just slam your head into the desk when you were hearing some of them. I will give them credit that now they're actually firing it up. I really feel like they're doing everything in the best interest of their players, at least from what I've seen with the Mets, what I've seen with the Yankees. Locally, it seems like they're going to do everything in their power to keep these guys healthy. And I'm just praying that that's going to be enough to get us through the season, because the bottom line of it, and we'll definitely get into how this season's going to be different. The biggest complaint and knock on baseball has been that it's a slow game, it's a boring game, it's a stale game. Obviously, we wouldn't be doing this if we felt that way, but that's been the knock on it. Now you're talking about a 60-game sprint to a championship. That's pretty damn exciting. You're basically having a playoff to get to a playoff. So
Yep.
if there's ever a time for them to capitalize on something really negative like a pandemic, this could be it. Every single game matters. The oldest cliche about baseball is, well, you're going to lose 50, you're going to win 50, and it all depends on what you do with the 62 in between. This is the 62 in between. These are the games that are going to matter more than we've ever seen before. So a shortened season, while not ideal for the hardcore traditionalist fan like yourself and I, will definitely, hopefully, have a greater appeal to the more casual fan.
Yeah, and I think too that we look at it as we head into the fall. I mean, obviously the NBA will be in their playoffs through, I think, November.
Yep.
And but they're not every night. And normally, you get to the fall and you have the competition of TV shows. Well, TV shows ain't starting on time this year.
Right.
So baseball is going to be up against occasionally a basketball playoff and maybe occasionally an NFL game if they get up and running. But realistically, it's Major League Baseball or reruns. It gives baseball a unique opportunity to get into some extra homes for people that are starved for new entertainment. You can only binge so many new shows, and eventually Netflix runs out too. The stars are aligning for baseball if it is able to, have its 60-game season and its playoffs, for baseball to do something really special, and grow a generation of fans that have since, been neglected and or cut off by baseball and how the sport is run. This is your chance. Get them back.
There's a reason why people are watching en masse cornhole championships on ESPN right now.
Yep.
There's a reason people are watching Formula One racing, something they'd never watched before in their life. There's a reason people are watching golf with no spectators, because we are so starved for entertainment. And a 60-game sprint to a playoff, I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. You're going to be seeing top tier pitching, top tier offenses, and every single outcome is going to matter. A 5-game winning streak is going to feel like a damn near 20-game winning streak in the regular season. So this can be really, really exciting times as long as they can manage to get it up and going.
You know, we've just come out of what is technically, I mean, obviously there was an aborted spring training in there, you know, back in February and March, but, you know, coming out of essentially what is the longest offseason in baseball history. I think even the strike in '95 started earlier than, I think it started in June.
Right.
You know, I don't want, let's not talk about the next strike. Let's get through this first. But at some point we'll have our good friend Maury Brown on to talk about that whole fiasco that is to come, I'm sure. But you know, the cool thing is, you know, this is going to be one of the cooler years for baseball because you know, once the Major League Baseball season wraps up, should it be able to, and we, like I said, certainly hope that it can. There's still a month and a half left of KBO.
Right.
Because they go deep into November themselves with their playoffs. And all those games are, you know, even though MLB will be back, we'll still have access to those games on ESPN. So, you know, in some ways, it's as weird as it is to say it, it's a good year to be a baseball fan.
It really is. Yeah, because the KBO getting the attention that it's gotten has been great. And then if you could compound that with Major League Baseball, it's a great time to be a baseball fan. And hence the reason it's a great time to fire up a 3-year defunct podcast.
Exactly. Hiatus.
That was it. Yeah.
The hiatus that seemingly never ended.
A hiatus that required toddlers to become children.
Yes, exactly. Well, sir, it has been, I mean, I think that is a great way to wrap this week's up. Next week, I anticipate having a guest to join us at some point through the proceedings, and certainly look forward to doing this again. The reality of it is, you know, we probably could go another 3, 4, 5 hours just catching up on the things that are going on, combined with, you know, the big stories we haven't covered in the last 3 years, but we'll go ahead and let that go. But I know that the initial list I drew up yesterday of things we could possibly talk about, we notched through 3 out of the 10. So, and that's not counting what's going to happen in the next week or so. But it's been fun. It's been exciting. It's been great to be back behind the mic again and able to talk some Mets baseball. I mean, I've been having a blast. This is just like old times, other than the fact that, you know, while I could see you, I couldn't see you.
Yeah, this is exactly what I needed right now. 4 months of quarantine, really getting to know my family well. I definitely needed to get back on the airwaves. And again, if we're starting this thing all over and it's just doing it for the hell of it, just the two of us listening, so be it. I'm good with it.
Yeah, no, this is hey, I'm talking to somebody who isn't my family. That's how do you know that it comes down to, it's addition by subtraction or something like that.
Right.
All I can say is it's better than watching Peppa Pig. That's what it comes down to.
And the proper pronunciation of the name George.
Yes. Every time I get gas now, my little girl says, "Are we getting petrol?" I was like, "Oh boy." Well, I should probably be proud of that, watching as much British programming as I do, but you know.
My wife is my 3.5-year-old now trained whenever he hears the sound of a potato chip bag to scream at the top of his lungs, "No more chips, Dad."
Wow. Well, sir, any final thoughts before we wrap things up?
No, I'm thrilled to be back, man. This is long overdue. It's a long time coming. Like I said, I think if everything works out well, we're going to have some really exciting baseball right off the bat here, and I can't wait to talk about it. And again, to the fans who were asking when we were coming back and lending us all the encouragement in the world on coming back, love you guys. Thanks. We're going to be here for a while, and hope you guys are too.
Sweet. Until next week, let's go Mets.